Hello and a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Now, Iran is a country home to a colourful array of ethnicities. They include Persians, Arabs, Azeris, Kurds, Baluchis, Lurs, and a group that's less so talked about. That's the Black Iranian community. While we have no verified figures, according to some reports, there are more than tens of thousands of Black Iranians who live in a number of cities. For instance, Abadan, Bandar Abbas, Bushehr, and Esfahan. And frankly, the list goes on. Now, many arrived on Iranian soil as a result of the Persian Gulf slave trade. Others came for economic opportunities. And to talk more about the Iranian African community, both in and out of the country, I'm joined by Priscilla Konkuhoveda. She's a human rights lawyer and one of the founders of the Collective for Black Iranians. Priscilla, it's wonderful to have you on. Tell us about your experience as a Black Iranian girl growing up in Tehran. This is a country where certainly at the time, many people had never even seen a Black person.
Thank you so much for having me, Sanam, today. And indeed, I think you've hit it right there. It was late 80s, early and mid 90s for me, having been born from an Iranian mother and a Congolese father, and having spent my formative years in Iran, Tehran, Isfahan, Mashhad, Qom, and mostly center and northern Iran. The experience has been, as a child, quite isolating, quite stigmatizing, a lot of teasing, a lot of othering, a lot of questions. Chera pustet siyas, why are you Black? Why are your hair this way, for those who could see my hair, and so forth. So lots of questions, and oftentimes for the 8-year-old, 6, 7, 9-year-old Black little girl that I was at the time, I didn't really have much answers to give them.
Now, you said it was isolating. Can you try and give us and our viewers some context here, Priscilla? Many Iranians to this day, they joke about the issue of race. Some of them still see Haji Firuz as a symbolic figure for the Persian New Year. That's, of course, their version of Father Christmas. But this is a polarizing figure. And the reason for that is because he's depicted with blackface.
Absolutely, Sanam. And to give you an example, it would often translate into being the only Black person in the room at Nowruz or the supermarket or the neighborhood school. I did not grow up in the southern part where in Abadan, Bushehr, or Bandar Abbas, you see more people who look like me and who would have looked like me. I was living in Tehran, traveling to Isfahan, where my grandfather is from, and spending a lot of time there. And for most folks there, it was their first time. And when there would be jokes made about me, oftentimes if I did wear some red, which I would be careful not to, it would be about being Haji Firuz and being there to make folks laugh. So a very, again, isolating experience where I didn't have a lot of answers to provide people, because I was raised by my Iranian side of the family, myself trying to understand why is it that the way that I looked was so surprising to a lot of my Iranian peers, family, relatives, friends, and later on colleagues.
So given that this was your personal experience, you decided, Priscilla, to travel around Iran, to reconnect with your roots, to meet other Black Iranians. Tell us about that.
Absolutely, Sanam, and it started through my own desire to understand better what it meant to be Black and Iranian, what it meant to be a part of the Iranian identity, not just as we hear it in Iran, but also on its diasporic iteration. And so I started reading about the connections between Africa and Iran. Literature is quite scarce. I was lucky enough to come across interesting scholarly articles that pointed towards research that was unearthing the Persian Gulf slave trade, but also economic opportunities between Iran and Eastern Africa, as well as, of course, as was the story of my parents, stories of migration by choice, folks falling in love and forming families that stand right at the intersection of being Black and African and Iran. And so it took me to Bandar Bushehr, to Bandar Abbas, to Qeshm, to Abadan, where I was finally able to experience an Iran that was more so at the image of who I am.
Priscilla, let's now take a moment together to listen to a mosaic of voices. We asked these men and women what it feels like to live in their skin as a Black Iranian.
به عنوان یک سیاه‌پوست سالها در کشور خودم احساس جدا افتادگی داشتم، ولی به لطف آگاهی بخشی‌ها دیگه چنین حسی ندارم و حالم خوبه.
زندگی آسونی نبوده ولی من ازش حس قدرت میگیرم و حس جنگجویانه‌ای میگیرم. یعنی منو جنگجو میکنه و قدرتمند.
بین دو فرهنگ بزرگ شدم و همیشه احساس میکردم که وسطش یه کمی گم شدم.
Standing at this intersection is always a flex. اصلا حرف نداره. You know, nothing moves without the say-so of black people. And when you combine that with the rich culture of Iranian heritage, that makes us the culture.
Priscilla, those testimonies are so moving, especially hear them as an Iranian. You, of course, have this NGO, Collective for Black Iranians. How are you trying to raise awareness through this organization?
So the Collective for Black Iranians was truly founded out of the necessity of being heard, seen, and understood, which I came to realize very quickly was not my only wish as a younger self when I was living in Tehran and Isfahan, but the wish of many other Black Iranians, not just in Iran, but also in the diaspora. The one of being seen as being a part of the conversation, the one of being seen and heard and understood as being a part of the community. And truly traveling to the South, but also to other parts of Iran that I had always been to, not necessarily aware of the presence of other Black Iranians, such as Shahin Shahr in Isfahan or other parts of Tehran, where you can find African braiding places for your hair and so forth. So it's truly just with the collective, the opportunity to finally raise awareness about what it means to stand at this intersection and share our stories of growth, our stories of belonging, our stories of what it means to be African, of African descent, to be Black, to be Iranian, or to be Iranian of African descent as well.
And what an incredible job you're doing. Priscilla Konku-Hoveda of the Collective for Black Iranians. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us here on Middle East Matters.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, that's it for this edition of the show. The last time with me, Sanam Shantier. Thank you so much for watching.